as well. So here we are. Look at this. The group is gathering, and we are all here together. It is a pleasure to be back on a Friday. It is time for KTLO episode 33 today. It is the magic episode 33. Well, it's not magic until we make it magic. And we are joined today by NJ Robinson and Kathy Velboom. But who are these people? Who are the people who are always on here? They're just incredibly uh, persistent. They show up on Friday, and it's like that for KTLO, keeping the learning on. Today's episode 33, we're going to talk about getting over it. So after this episode, we may have to get over it. I'm not sure. We're going to try our best, as we always do. This is not a webinar. It's not a training session. It is a discussion among people who know each other and care about such things. So we're going to talk about getting over it today, and with the four key members of this little group: Patty Blackstaff.
Good morning.
Greg Sanker.
Hello.
Simone Jo Moore.
Hi.
And moi. I am also today's interviewer. I'm stuck with this. And NJ and Kathy, you can say hello to the nice people.
Hello out there.
Hello, everyone.
I appreciate that you guys join us. I mean, you've been here before, so you know what you're getting into.
Exactly, which is why we keep coming back.
Yes.
I'm not
So
sure what that says about any of us, but
I know.
So
You're going to really
speaking-
like this episode, though. I'm excited for this episode.
Are you?
Yes,
Why is that, Greg?
because I need to get over it.
Okay. So let's talk about getting over it. We started talking about this topic and we kicked around a thing. And here's something that I used to do. I don't know where I picked this up along the way, but I used to keep a package of Q-tips in my desk drawer. And when any of my reports were having a problem and they were obviously thinking that the world was out to get them, I would take out the package of Q-tips and say, here, quit taking it personally. And so part of this is going to be talking about what's personal, what's not personal. But Patty, you've got a lot of things to say in this area. And one of the things that you talked about the last time we spoke on this topic was get over it and move on. All of that is about you, not them. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, you know, Roy, we often talk about how we talk about leadership so much on this conversation on KTLO as we learn with each other. And we're always saying in leadership that it's not about you. It's not about you. But when it comes to getting over it, it's all about you. It's all about how you are impacted and how you're moving through it. I think there's a lot to be said in terms of what that looks like for anyone. I think we're all going through this pandemic right now, and we're all going through a number of things. And life is kind of like a river, right? It widens, and you can paddle and look at the scenery and get through it, and then it will narrow, and then you've got to work like heck to get through the rapids, right? It's an awful lot of work, and sometimes the boat flips and you've got to figure out what you've got to do about that. And life is like that. It does that at times, and sometimes the river's really narrow, and how do you get over it, right? There are some things you have to do, and there's some descaling that has to happen. And so it's all about you. You've got to decide some things, like, what's my timeline for grieving? How am I going to, how long am I going to lie fetal? Because I'm really good at that. I get hit, I'm an emotional person. And so when I get hit hard, and that emotionality in me kind of flows over me. I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like that my boat overturns sometimes. And so taking time to put a time limit on my grieving is really an important thing for me.
So let me ask you this one, Patty. I'll just follow up there for a minute and ask you that an awful lot of times we have some elephant in the room that we're not talking about. And that's part of getting over something, right? It's acknowledging the elephant's existence and packing its trunk and sending it on its way. Can you talk a little bit about that? How do you find the
Sure.
elephant in the room?
I think the most important thing, and this goes with almost anything in life, and it goes with almost anything in work. You got to name the thing. If we're not naming it, if we're walking around it and we're not naming it, if we aren't actually putting this is the thing and this is what's getting to me, we're not dealing with it. So I had someone tell me a long time ago, if you're still talking about it, you're not over it. And there's two pieces to that. There is the how you're talking about it, right? If you're talking about it in terms of what this brought for my life and how it has moved me forward, that's a learning conversation. If you're talking about it in a victim conversation, this is what the situation has done to me, then you're not dealing with the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room might just be your reaction to what's going on around you.
Interesting. So Simone, Patty talked about the river and how it narrows and widens and how the speed of the river changes and so forth. You talk about swimming in experience. Do you want to elaborate on that idea? You're swimming in the ocean of your experience. How does that work?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. One of the things when we talk about resilience, some people, they can have a major trauma and, they will move through and get to the other side of that in whatever way they may do that. But all of a sudden, yes, I'm resilient. I can handle anything. But resilience is like a muscle. It takes practice and you keep building that each time and finding new techniques and new approaches and things like that. So what happens where before you may have stood in a puddle or you're out in the field and you end up, up to your knees in mud, then the next time you find yourself up to your armpits, I usually say I'm always in it, just the depth varies. So it's one way to look at it. That's swimming in the ocean of experience. But I think the timeline one is interesting because in organizations, they will give you, each organization is slightly different in their policies, but they'll say, yeah, we'll give you 3 days grief leave, on top of your normal leave or something like that. For me, the time actually doesn't heal the wound at all. I've actually found over all these years that the intensity of that pain always exists. It's just what changes is the length of time between when we feel that way. And what I really like about it, though, is that when we do start to, remember that experience from wherever it comes, because it does resurface when we come across a similar situation or we get put into another environment or a context that has, alarm bells start to ring off in our brain and say, hang on, this feels similar. This feels like what I've had before. Is that it's our memories of the lighter moments and of in that same context or that we find that it's a balancing act. This whole thing, I think, of the timeline is a balancing act, and we learn that as we go along. And that's where I think that building from the puddle into an ocean is something where we build that resilience and we start getting better at the way in which we manage those things.
NJ, I'm going to put you in the light here for a second because I know that you've had some things in your life recently that maybe you had to be resilient about and respond to and resurface and regather yourself. So you want to talk about how you got through that a little bit?
So I think you're referring last year, I had a very, very diagnosed with a very rare case of kidney cancer. And I found that at a leadership conference in Colorado. So I just dealt with, so I had the initial shock of, wow, I can't believe this. It was very, 5% of people with kidney cancer get it. And I was relatively young. And so just a shock, but then it was, okay, I had to center myself and think about, there's a lot of unknowns here. And so what are the things I can control? And what are the things that is outside of my control? And that's been a recipe for, so kind of that puddle to like the pond type of analogy. I started that type of thing years ago. Professionally, I used to get so concerned with everything. And I really helped me de-stress. It's like, okay, what is it that I can control? What is it that I can influence? And what are the things I can't have any kind of influence or control over? And I let those things go, and I just focus on what I can do. And so with the kidney cancer thing, it was like, okay, it's nothing I can do about it. I'll listen to what the doctor says, and I'll keep a positive state of mind and stay positive and always look at the better side of things. But and everything else I couldn't control, I just let it go. And I realized I'm worrying about so many different factors. I don't even know what the options are. And so it's just maintaining that a sense of sanity and looking at the positive things. So mindset to me is very important. But really focus on those things you can't control. I mean, you control, and then letting everything else be what it is.
I so agree with that, NJ. I think it really is one of those things, like, even, I know this sounds maybe crazy to some, but just as simple as walking in the sunshine. It makes something different. It can remind you of something else. It brings other detail into focus. And really, it kind of turns around and says, hey, look at me. So something else takes our attention, if you like. And there's no judgment, there's no complication. It just simply says, hey, I exist. This matters right now. And that's, I think, when you feel it deeply, that's when you know how much it has impacted or has had an influence on you, and to appreciate that.
Very true. Very true.
I love that you brought up the sphere of influence, sphere of control, because if you really think about that, generally speaking, and this is something I've actually thought about quite a lot, is, in the center is things you can control, and around that is things that you have some ability to influence, and everything outside of that is what I've come to know as gravity issues. You can't change it; it's just there. But the sobering reality is, what you have control over is profoundly small, and the amount of energy that one tends to apply to things that you might want to reshift and think about influencing or accepting because you really can't change it is the energy. If we redirect the energy away from those items onto the ones that you can actually control, just to what you said, NJ, is like, okay, what is actually in my control, and try to focus on those things. I think that's really key to me, because you can waste a lot of energy. I call it shaking your fist at the sky, because when you're done, the situation is unaffected, and you've just expended a whole bunch of energy that you could spend on something else. So that's my
Isn't that the T-shirt, Greg, where it's got the eagle in the sky coming down at the mouse, and the mouse is flipping in the bird?
I don't know how that applies, but yes.
It's like the last act of defiance.
Yes. I thought that was American, but maybe it's Aussie.
I love what you guys are talking about, because I think that the important thing to understand is every single thing we do in life is about living in the moment right now and asking yourself one question. And the question is, in this moment, given the situation around me, what can I do? What action can I take to add value to myself or to the situation? And I think if you can narrow things down, NJ, I think it's absolutely beautiful that you really focused on and are focusing on, what do I have control over? Because Greg, you're right. We have, so little control. When we're screaming at the sky or whatever, the sky doesn't care. That's what we have to remember, right? The event doesn't care.
Yeah, and frankly, isn't listening, isn't able to listen. And so really, and I'm talking about me, right? I'll just record this and listen to it again tomorrow, right? But we have to depersonalize those events to the point where we can put ourselves some distance, because it isn't personal. even if you're dealing with a bad situation, a bad person, somebody ripped you off, somebody treated you badly, robbed you out of an opportunity, it feels personal. And Patty, I'm gonna sucker you into this conversation. It feels very, very personal, and yet treating it as if it is personal robs you of your very opportunity to do something about it. And you talked about the equation that's really annoying to me. It's true, but it's really annoying to me. Tell us about that. How's that for set up?
Yeah. Roy, you're done. You don't need to interview today. Greg just took it over for you.
All right, going home.
So I think it's a few years ago, I was reading a book by Jack Canfield. I think it's called Principles. And in it, he had an equation, E plus R equals O. So events plus your reaction to the event equals the outcome for you. And that really spoke to me for a lot of reasons, because like I said, I'm an emotive person. And so when an event happens around me, my first go-to, and probably from years ago as a child when I was bullied, that was my first go-to at the time when I was reading the book, was my reaction was, it's personal, right? And I think that what I liked about this is the event doesn't care. And I said that earlier, the event doesn't care, it's neutral. The event has happened. Unfortunately, it's your reaction to that event that is going to define your ability to shape the outcome. So the reaction itself defines the ability to shape the outcome. And the reaction plus the actions you take can lead toward an outcome. But you got to have in your mind, what outcome am I trying to achieve here? What do I want from this? Do I want this to be a positive experience? And there's some reframing that we can do. For instance, instead of saying, why has this happened to me? Perhaps a better question is, why is this happening for me? What's coming? What can I trust that 2 years down the road, I'm going to believe this has happened for me? There is some reaction and some reframing in there that allows us the opportunity to start looking at being more positive about the little bits of control, that tiny sphere of control that we do have in our lives.
So Patty, you added something to the conversation there about the equation when you said it gives us the ability to shape the outcome. So E plus R gives us the ability to shape the outcome. And I think that's an important qualifier, because as you and I have discussed on prior, and Greg as well on prior occasion, you're not necessarily, the outcome isn't carved in stone by E plus R. It's the ability to shape the outcome that matters in this case, right?
And Patty, you said something I want to really emphasize. I wrote it down and I underlined it. You said outcome for you.
Yeah.
For you, yes.
And I think that's really important.
You can't, you're not going to change an organization, right?
Exactly.
Somebody in the organization stands on your shoulder, sticks a knife in your back, whatever that looks like. Your reaction to that isn't going to shape anything outside of you. Your reaction to it is only going to shape how you choose to define the outcome.
Yeah.
That
Kathy, it
happens
looks
on
like
a timeline, doesn't it? Like, there's still a trigger, the event itself, like the trigger even for the event itself. So, and as our emotions unfold along that timeline, I mean, that trigger happens in a context, right? So, I think we can actually have the same trigger can lead to different responses, which I find quite interesting, because it can be a friend stood us up for a movie date or something, and in one circumstance we might be okay with that and be worried about them, and in another circumstance we might be angry with them. So I think it's really interesting that just understanding that we can have, depending on the emotion we're feeling at the time, those triggers can have a different experience for us. So, you know, there goes that ocean of experience again. So what are the current circumstances and the feelings? What is the actual event? What is it we're being influenced by in our prior experience or personal history with that type of event or that type of trigger or person? Because there's no, you know, sometimes we have these inherited universal scripts about certain things.
Oh, we create whole movies in our head. Are you kidding? And we bring it forward and we pack it forward. You know, we have this I like to call it the curio cabinet, right? We've got this curio cabinet of ills. And every once in a while we open the doors and we take something out and we shine it and we remember it and we bring it forward on the shelf, and then we close the doors, we walk away, we come back, we open the door, you know, and every time something happens, we put it in our little curio cabinet. It becomes our little cabinet of evidence for why we believe something is happening to us, or how we are treated in the world, or how our experience as a human on this planet is unfolding. And one of the things we need to remember is that, you know, when we talked about timeline of grieving, when we opened this, I want to clarify something, Simone, for you, is that I'm not saying you can say, on the 30th of March, I am going to stop feeling pain, right? That's not what I meant. Timeline for grieving, when I said that, was how long am I going to lay on the floor fetal? And when am I going to decide that it's time to get up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When am I going to decide that it's time to get up? How long am I going to allow myself to weep in the moment? And how long am I going to say, now I need to get on with things, even though this hurts, right?
But isn't that line, that battle that we have with the organization sometimes? You know, hang on, it's not personal, it's business. Because the business has a particular expectation, yet you've got all this internal maelstrom going on, where, okay, how are we going to break that cycle? How are we going to make sure that we can get over the line?
Right. Well, I think that it's really important here when we understand that it's all about you, because this is the piece where, I mean, look at us. We are these crazy mixed up bowl of soup of agendas and expectations, and we're all colliding with each other, and somebody stirs the soup and we bump into the carrots, and it, you know, organizational complexity is a bit of a mess, right? We have a lot going on, and the only thing you have control over is how you're going to take it, how you're going to interact with the other mix in the soup, and what you're going to do to react to the bump, right? Or to the stir. And you have to define for yourself where you fit in the situation. How do I get creative under these constraints? What part of my own freak flag can I fly that's going to allow me to really be unique in this situation and make it positive and make it better? And am I calling out the elephant in the room? And do I have the power to do that?
So I want to get to Kathy, who's been, I think you've been taking copious notes over there, Kathy.
As usual.
But, yeah. But I also wanted to say, is there a Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the house? Is Dr. Kubler-Ross here? Because I keep thinking about the stages of grief as you're talking about, you know, anger, denial, etc.
Yeah.
So,
you know, that's been challenged quite a bit lately, Roy.
I know it has, and indeed it has. So, well, it's getting old. But Kathy, what have you've been taking notes, and I want to know what particularly has struck you about this conversation, and how are you relating to it?
The biggest thing that has struck me has been the word choice. We have choices, especially as leaders. You take all those factors, internal, external, intentional, non-intentional, whatever it might be. And I'm not going to go back to the part of grieving a situation, but more when there is a situation, to use that almighty pause, to separate the emotion from the situation, and then determine, because sometimes short term you you have to respond, react, do something. And sometimes you have to pause enough to put your whole emotional, everything that's going on inside your head to take care of the situation. And then you come back personally. And so many things affect it. If you talk about if someone, rubs you the wrong way at work, it depends who it is. It could be just a friendly coworker who is having a bad day, or it can be someone that you just can't stand at work. And what goes on in here is completely different based on the situation. And so to me, it's all about choice.
Yeah, good point. And I think that's really the crux of the conversation is defining for ourselves where the line is and trying to see, okay, that's not something I can control. This is something I can control. And sometimes the thing you can control is very small. It's a very small thing, but then you can kind of work to build that, make that bigger, build a sphere of a pocket of happiness, as Patty would say, around whatever that is, and expand your control. Patty, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, when I said earlier, what can I do in this situation, like right this minute to add value? As a leader, you're responsible for other people, and adding value is not about you. So in the moment, you're calm. I love how you said that, Roy, because it's like a ripple. When you are calm, the room is calm. When you don't react, the room doesn't react. But when we're running around the building going, oh my God, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, our entire team runs around the building saying the sky is falling. And anyone who's been in an organization knows that the minute there is something negative in an organization, within 5 minutes, it's hit 6 floors, right? So.
And can I add one thing? People feel that, Patty, that ripple effect.
Yeah.
It might not be just your physical action. I honestly think we project an energy. And if we are choosing to give energy to a situation, that finite amount of energy that we have in a day, we're going to suck people into that.
I show things on my face. I really show things on my face. And so I'm like, are you kidding me? And the whole room knows it. I don't even have to say it, right? It's the whole room knows it. And so part of it is the self-talk you have to do, and then the outside talk you have to do in reframing. And if you can have a shock on your face like I get every single time, because I can never play poker. I'll lose every single time. But if you can then stop and say, here's how that hit me. What do we have control over? What are our constraints? How do we handle this? And you can literally turn that initial reaction into not 5 floors of gossip within the next 5 minutes, right?
And I was going to make a quick joke, if I could, about, well, you're just being a transparent leader when you show your true emotion.
Like,
which goes back to how much we are truly transparent. But I digress. Go ahead, Roy.
Oh, that's okay. But I Digress was a couple episodes ago. So if you're watching this now and you're new to KTLO, go back and watch But I Digress. NJ, do you tend to, are you a good poker player, or do you tend to show stuff?
I show it. I can't hide it at all. And I'm something I've been trying to work on, but I'm tempted just to give it up because I like just being transparent and authentic.
Yeah, I knew that about you. I just wanted you to say it. Yeah. Greg, what have you learned about being a leader and reacting to situations in the moment that could be helpful for people to know?
Wow, that's a smorgasbord, isn't it? So here's one of the things that I have learned the hard way. I'm a fairly transparent person, and I'm also one of those people that there can be an entire conversation in a room that doesn't include me because everybody knows my position on various things, not because I'm a know-it-all, but because I'm very clear about those things. And I've participated in conversations about what Greg thinks. It's very, very fascinating. But when you're in a strategic at a boardroom or C-suite level conversation, stuff happens. And everybody is watching everything. They're watching how you breathe. They're watching where your eyes dart. And so there's a cat off camera over there with Simone. that's really hard to keep your concentration. So Kathy, your point about that the projecting an energy is I was actually coached and mentored to pay attention to facial expressions, to pauses,
Body.
to choice of words, right? Because that's what's really going on in the room. That being the case, people are reading me and they're listening to me. And so that pause that you talked about is tremendously important, because you need to have enough time where you can think, what response is the most advantageous for those that I represent, for the interests that I'm trying to move forward here? Because my personal response of, that's a pretty moronic thing to say, probably doesn't move my cause forward, right? In fact, it does just the opposite. And so that intentionality, I've definitely gone to school on emotional intelligence, because it's one of the biggest opportunities that I have to create better outcomes for myself and those around me. I don't know that I can make my IQ go up. I don't know that I can, make my past history or my resume any better. But going forward, I can be a more effective leader. And I think that's that. Let's focus on the things that we can control or influence.
So Pepe Le Chat is making an appearance over there by Simone, and
Put Pepe on camera.
Yeah, let's say
Okay,
something.
so this is like world, meet Pepe. he came on for a little bit of a hello and a cuddle. Since we're talking about emotional, things that we can do to keep us calm, pets do that for us, don't they?
So here's what I was thinking, though. We're talking about things you can control and things you can't control. And I would posit that on the things you can't control, cats are high on the list. Right? We even make jokes in leadership. We talk about herding cats.
Herding cats, absolutely.
Dogs, on the other hand, are pretty good candidates for training, and you can exert a good deal of control over dogs. So when you think of the things that can be controlled and those that can't be controlled, maybe cats and dogs is a good way to look at it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well,
it's called family therapy.
Yes. Thank you, Pepe, for bringing that to our attention.
They say you can own a dog, but a cat owns you.
And having done both, I can attest to that fact. So there you go. And it also occurred to me that we have two other members of the cat conversation here that we have not yet introduced to our audience today. We have introduced at least one of them on previous occasions. One of them is called Yebut. So Patty, would you introduce Yebut, please?
This is Yebut. He's right here. He sits with me. He spends time with me. Every time I think of a bad idea, he says, yeah, but.
And we also have Bert. Simone, would you introduce Bert, please?
Yeah, I'm not too sure if you're going to be able to see him so close there, but that's Bert, and he's a PNG house spirit. And he's there. Yeah, Bert.
You did say burp.
I did say burp. And he is a PNG house spirit, and he is actually there to scare away all the bad spirits. So as they try to enter. So he keeps safe space.
Basically, he needs to be on the show. Chase away all the bad spirits.
That's it. And speaking of chasing away bad spirits.
Well, actually, that's a good segue too. I was going to ask something earlier, if you don't mind. And that is, we talk a lot about it's not personal, control what you can control, blah, blah, blah. There are situations where those around you or the circumstance or the organization that you're in is willfully and intentionally not good towards you or other people. Mm-hmm. And so the concept, and hear me out here, the concept that it's only my reaction, it's not personal, controls the outcome, sounds a little bit like a cop-out when there's really bad things happening. Hold on. It sounds like that until you recognize that what's in my control is I don't have to tolerate this situation. I have choices that I can make. And if I sit here and continue to say, that's wrong, that's bad, you're doing that intentionally, bad behaviors in organizations, gaslighting, and all kinds of other bad behaviors, you still have choices. And so the context of that is actually is a little bit bigger. You don't have to sit there and tolerate and just say, well, what's the best thing that I can do in this abusive, not good situation? You have choices. I'd love to get your response to that, Patty. We did not rehearse this.
Hang on. Before
we
Patty
did
goes
not.
on, I just want to say that's when I actually wish that sarcasm was a font.
With me, sarcasm is a font. I don't know if you know that.
No, that's when I want it so I can actually respond to those particular emails.
So you just put that into the area of which we cannot control. So just like organizations, when in our practice, we always work with our clients and say, what you tolerate, you propagate, right? Everything you tolerate, you are saying is good here, we're accepting it, and it's okay. And if you're in an organization where that's occurring, then you have to personally take that, what I tolerate, I propagate. And you have to weigh, there is a weight scale that you need to take to decide how you're going to respond to that. What are the consequences if I choose not to tolerate a specific type of behavior, or I choose not to tolerate how someone next to me is being treated, and what does that look like? And I'll give you a little example. I worked for an organization many, many years ago where I was asked into the president's office. They pulled me in and he was belittling someone because he didn't like the way the fellow was dealing with a client. And when he was belittling that guy, he was asking me to partake in that, not directly, but in a way by having me in the room. And I stood there not knowing what to do or how to handle it until we went out to the client, we dealt with it, I came back, put my briefcase next to my desk, walked into his office unannounced and said, don't you ever pull me into a situation where you are asking me to belittle another human being. If you want to deal with something in a way that treats people with respect, then I'm on board. But if you ever ask that of me, now I had to think for a couple hours before I was willing to do that, because I knew I would not be working there the next day. I knew that I would not be working there the next day. But what I can say is that I went to bed and slept well because I treated another human being with respect. So we have some choices. Not all of us have those choices. We have mortgages, we have car payments, we have kids in private schools, we have kids in activities, we have, all those things that us humans have that we have to deal with. You always have a choice. You have to understand the consequence of that choice, and then you have to make a plan. And if your plan is, I'm not going to tolerate this, but I need this space right now, then you build a different plan. What is my exit strategy? How long is that going to take? What's it going to look like so that I can find a place that does respect human beings, right?
I think of when you said an exit strategy, there was a series a number of years ago on television called Murder One. It was an extremely interesting and intense show. And one of the characters was portrayed by Stanley Tucci. And Stanley Tucci gets accused of murder. Simone is nodding, so you've watched this. You're familiar with the show.
I actually really love that show and still watch repeats on YouTube.
It is absolutely, it's a great show. And there's a scene, one of the most effective pieces of acting I've ever seen in my life, actually. Stanley Tucci is in jail, and the lawyer, who's the central character in the show, comes to visit him in jail. And Stanley Tucci looks at him through the chicken wire and says, "Get me out." And that's how it feels sometimes when you're in a situation like this. You're looking for that person who can magically spring you from jail and get out of that emotional cage that you're in. So, NJ, do you have any thoughts on how to work through that situation where you feel like you need an outside hand to come in and pull you out? Who's your outside hand, or what is it? What is your outside hand? What's your go-to?
That's actually a good question. It's hard for me to answer. it's hard. Honestly, I don't think the tough situations I've kind of been in. I talked to my wife, talked to a good friend of mine. A lot of my time has been in the military, so you don't always necessarily you can't necessarily just leave, leave a situation, you just have to deal with it. And so kind of the same framework of, okay, there's some things I can't control here, but let me work on what I can control. Um, and then sometimes what I've also seen is that, especially if this person behaves towards you in a negative manner, there's other people around you who can identify with the situation you're in. And so they kind of create this group, if you will, that you can talk about those issues. And there's strength in a community of people who feel the same way, that can kind of build you up and they understand what you're going through. And you just move on. And you move through it.
And Jay, I have a question for you around that. It's really quite interesting, in the military, various postings, you might not see someone or even speak to them for 5 years, 10 years, even depending on how it moves around. But for some reason, there's this magic element that occurs that when you finally do see each other again, you just pick up the conversation where you left off. And that to me is a unique moment. And that's the type of support team or the type of relationship that you would hope that you could build even within your organization.
Yes, no, you're true. Very true.
I'm not sure how we can actually go about that sometimes, getting that magic to happen.
Yeah.
How much of that, let me ask you this, Simone, and NJ as well, since you both have a military background. How much of that ability to pick up the conversation 5 years later is built around the fact that there are very tightly defined relationships within the military, right? There's rank, there's role, there's all of the things that go into defining what your position is and what your role is with those around you. And of course, the close-knit relationships that evolve depending on situations that you're in, et cetera, et cetera. So how much of a role do you think that plays? And is that something that organizations can learn from in terms of defining roles?
So I think you have something there, because I can, especially when I use my time when I was in Italy. It's a lot of the military community work a lot closer when we're in Italy, because we're all Americans in a country that's completely different. And so that brings you together, kind of talking the same thing I was saying, when you find people who've been wronged by a certain person, talk to you on the side and say, hey, I've been there too. And I think that's significant, because I still have good communication, good relationships with a lot of those people I was with Italy with back in 1999. Wow, 99, when my first duty stayed in Italy. I still have good relationships with those individuals. And so when you're looking at an organization, how do you create that? So I think it's there. I see some of my best relationships formed through small teams working on projects, and so especially a lot of times you talk about agile and these different things and working in smaller teams. Those type of that close knit, the team cohesive really grows in those smaller groups. And so if it's something that's advantageous for organization to do, maybe creating those small groups, and being very intentional on also identifying the right personality fits for those different groups as well, could be some type of opportunity there. But it's really hard it's hard to replicate that.
It is indeed. There's because, this is where we talked about that line, whether it's personal and business. In that particular case, it is actually both, because you signed on the dotted line, you belong to them 24/7. So I think there's definitely a difference with that. Whereas with an organization, we might say, okay, at the end of the shift, that's it, we go home and we can do something completely different. So I think some organizations have been able to tap into it and others not. I think part of it, though, is about how we go about creating those relationships in the first place within the organization. Where do we sit in that nexus? Where are those influence lines? Not just the hierarchical lines. It's not just about the structure. It's also how we naturally find the rapport with particular people over certain context or over certain experiences that we can relate to. And that's, I think, a very fundamental human need, is to find that relation, to find that belonging. And that's how we start knitting together those communities.
Greg, you've been very quiet today. Now I'm going to pick on you. Is relationship building of the type that we've been talking about within organizations, and just going back for a second to that idea that close groups form around a common theme or a common event or a common episode, as NJ was saying, you know, being in Italy together or being in a particular place at a particular time, the band of brothers concept, really. How much of that applies to people who gravitate together at work who might have a common enemy, right? Or a common point of view about something. In addition to their formal role, you know, a group might form around a particular idea or a particular approach. And at the risk of gaining your ire, self-organizing team comes to mind here. And I know how you feel about that term, but why don't you, how do you form relationships that work for you within an organization at every level? Because you've worked, you know, you've been from frontline to C-level, and talk about that relationships.
I just forgot everything you said when you said self-organizing teams. I'm totally lost. I have no idea. No, I think NJ opened a really important chapter of a book, and that we as human beings tend to find affinity with other people, something that we share in common, something that maybe that we hold deeply, like, hey, I'm a person of integrity. I speak the truth. I was not in the military, though both my father and father-in-law are Marines. But there's this sense of integrity that we achieve the mission, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, we face it regardless of how hard it is. I worked for a rather large Fortune 10 company where anywhere in the world, if you exchange the name of that company and you found somebody else that worked there, you instantly had a best friend, because the values of the organization, what we're about and how we approach things was so deeply ingrained in the psyche that we saw that affinity. In a workplace, I think there's both positive and negative aspects of that. You know, that natural tendency to form bonds around some kind of a shared experience can be very positive, like, you know, to make a small team that is doing agile development or delivering a project on time, of, you know, we worked the weekend and we met the business need, those kinds of things. But it also can be exclusionary. We don't share your experience. You're from another country or a different culture, or you have different thoughts about certain things. And it may not be personal, but we just find that it just doesn't resonate with us. So I don't feel that affinity. And that becomes challenging there as well. I think organizations that are very intentional about their values and the behaviors that are accepted, what you tolerate, you propagate, is where you find that kind of bonding that crosses those kind of, you know, diversity kind of differences between folks. And I think as leaders, we want to create some anchors and things that are meaningful to the company. You know, it's like the proverbial boss that's like, you know, I could have played in the NBA, and so at lunch we're going to go and play basketball, and that's who my friends are, is the ones that go play basketball. And if that's not what you're about, well, you know, it's like that would be considered, I think, poor leadership in the wrong context. But if you say, hey, we're about achievement here, and we recognize people when they make achievements, we're about you know, being integrous and transparent with our customers because our customers are important, and you start forming those, who are we and what are we about, and what are those things that we don't violate, and we start finding that we can really agree with those things, I think then we can start forming those bonds with people that otherwise we may not have really, you know, accidentally talked to or whatnot.
Kathy, I see your mind racing along there, and the gears are turning.
She's either really agreeing with me or she's really.
I'm really agreeing.
Yeah.
I was thinking about a company that I worked for, and one of the things on every wall was we put the customer first in everything we do. Simone and I have some similar backgrounds where we're in, providing dial tone to hospitals. I was in like code paging. So different things of getting response teams there. It was life or death. And so I think about those situations when you go through that, it bridges across all departments because it bridges across, it comes into support. You may need development, you may have the project team because something's going on there. And everybody absolutely did everything they could to put the customer first. You know what happened with that? And you go through those types of situations, and I was relating to some of the military stuff, is we had very intense projects. We became extremely close to our customers. I just spoke to a customer yesterday at a local hospital because they have static on their hold music, and we got off chatting about the old days. But we were eventually acquired by a public company, and that became a joke on the wall. And you could see the culture start to change.
Ouch.
And so that's where I just, that it really hits home. If that from leadership, you're going to instill that and support it, and you get the backing from leadership to put the customer first, and then that changes, everything else again, going back to the ripple effect.
Yeah, been in an organization that did have a very close-knit community and really had a clear set of values, and then there were some changes at the upper level that changed that entire mindset, and things really started, and the outflow, the attrition that happened was really quite something to see.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous
See, it
amounts
is
of knowledge and
personal.
experience.
It is, yeah.
It is. It's not, but it is, but it's not, but it is, but it's not.
Right, but we're talking a little bit about resilience here, right? I mean, stuff is going to happen around us. These events are going to occur around us. And one of the most powerful strengths we have in resilience is staying centered and grounded while the world around you is falling apart, right? The centering of ourselves, I mean, there are 4 areas of the human experience, okay? Personal achievement, which is me. And there's belonging, which is we, because we talked a little bit about that here this morning. There's curiosity, which is how you approach the unknown. And there's control, is how do I deal with the known? And when we look at that united front, everybody in an organization, Kathy, I'm looking at your example or listening to your example, and I'm thinking, isn't it neat when you're in an organization, you can all rally around something that's bigger than yourselves, right? That's what we want. We want the ability to really meet a purpose, and we want to belong in there. So how we deal with those 4 areas of the human experience ourselves. So sometimes it is personal because we suffer a loss in that, but in that loss, our resilience is, how do I deal with how my personal achievement will continue to move forward, and what can I achieve and where am I going? That's a personal question you ask yourself. The belonging piece, the we piece, is really about, do I still belong here? Do I still belong here? And if not, what's my plan? And then how the organization deals with curiosity and how you deal with curiosity. So I know, having gone through what Simone loves to call mergers and acquisitions, having gone through a couple of those and being on the small fish side when a big fish swallows you up, the ability to, and we're talking about getting over it now, the ability to address the curiosity of where this is going and to understand whether your personal achievement still is there. We have to be cautious in that meantime space. There's, it's becoming, and this is the meantime. And what am I doing in my resilience to do self-care and also be able to move myself through, how can I work on achievement? Where do I belong? Is there a belonging piece here that I can latch on to? What can I be curious about so that I can help others rethink some of your thoughts? So that's where coaching, it comes into play in my mind, because I'm a coach. The more curious I am, the more opportunity the client has of rediscovering what they're thinking about and whether that's actually a good idea. And then
Patty, just before we
Understanding
get
what
on
you
next,
can do in your constraints.
yeah, just before you get on that, I just wanted to mention, Patty, because you posted a great article the other day and it fits in with your curiosity. And I wanted to point people to that. So if they can look at LinkedIn, they can see the post. But the article was, I thought there was a great distinction of what you just said then, which was the difference between self-care and self-help,
Mhm. Mhm.
because that leads into your next point.
Yeah, I think so. We can define what we do under the constraints under which, the new constraints that have just landed on top of us. We have to figure that out for ourselves. So it is about us. It's about how we fit, whether we feel like we can meet personal achievements, belong, whether we are allowed to exercise our curiosity, the constraints we have control over, what don't we have control over. There's this united front. Self-care is about being strong in understanding that there are some things you can take care of. I can take care of how I feed myself. I can take care of the kind of sleep I get. I have control over my ability to embark in nature and find the moment. And so all of the centering pieces are based around self-care. Self-help is, I'm going to read some stuff and I'm probably going to believe it intellectually, but I don't necessarily need to act on it, right? So we've all known the leader who read a new leadership book, and don't get me wrong, because I'm about to publish one. I want people reading this, but at the same token, we know the leaders who oh God, yeah, he just read another book. Now we're going to go on this trajectory, and now we're going to go on that. So the intellectual self-help is different than self-care, and we have to be really clear that resilience lives in self-care.
Absolutely.
Resilience lives in self-care.
Self-care.
Maybe that's our lesson to take away today from this conversation. It's been an interesting conversation, has it not? I think that all of it is helping to some extent. We're all in situations now, whether they be because of grief or because of some situation our countries might be in, or because of personal situations or organizational situations. We can learn from this and try to not be Stanley Tucci in jail yelling, "Get me out," but trying to get ourselves out of situations by understanding what the elephant in the room is, what we can control, what we can't control, and coming to terms with that somehow. So keep on chugging along. Thanks to the core group, of course, Patty, Greg, and Simone, and NJ and Kathy. Thanks for coming by again. You see, this is the problem. You come here once and then you come back. I mean, I don't understand that. It's a foreign concept to me. Why you would experience this and then come back for more? But thank you for doing that. And we'll be back in a week or so here on KTLO, keeping the learning on, whatever that is, that thing.